How are we doing, everyone? This is the book English Derived from the Hebrew by Robert Govett, with glances at the Greek and Latin, and this one out between the post on which one we should read first from either this book or the ancient history of Caledonia, which we will read afterwards, okay? So today is the 23rd of the sixth month. It is the second day of the new wood offerings on our Creator's calendar. It happens to line up with the 1st of September, 2025 on the Gregorian calendar. And hopefully, this book will be edifying for everyone. I have a physical copy here. I bought two. The second one I prefer. It's got a nice cover for it on the front and back, and a little more information in it. This was a reprinted the last time it seems in 1999 was the copyright. The original printing was in 1869. But there's a publisher's preface on the hard copy that I have that I would like to read. So if you give me just one moment. It says Sacred Truth Ministries is very pleased to be able to offer our second printing of this fine book, now in a computer-enhanced edition. Mr. Robert Govett was a brilliant man, and we are especially pleased to be able to continue his work on this very fascinating topic. Though he wrote in the mid-1800s, Mr. Govett's findings are no different today. A professor at a major U.S. university is in the process of finishing his own book on the subject. And I believe that was Randy McNeil. Not McNeil, I'm sorry. There's a few books. There was a dissertation that was written not too long ago, and then a book that expanded on it that was written by someone that might be the gentleman they're talking about, but I don't know that for certain. Either way, it says, though unaware of Mr. Govett's book, when I told him that Govett claimed that 95% of all English/German words were of Hebrew origin, he declared, I agree 100%. Many others in the last 100 years have written on this subject. However, Mr. Govett's work is no doubt the most complete. And then it has a picture, presumably, of the man. And below that, it says, the great Charles Haddon Spurgeon said, Mr. Govett wrote 100 years before his time, and the day will come when his works will be treasured as sifted gold. I found that to be interesting. I thought I'd like to share there. On the back cover of the book I have, it has the alphabets of ancient Latin, Hebrew, Greek, modern Latin, modern Hebrew, and modern Greek. So you can see them all compared to one another, which is rather nice. But here in the index, and we'll go over this quickly and then we'll get into the book itself. The index is going to cover the topics at hand and just where the words are coming from. Chapter 1 would be beasts, birds, fish, insects. Chapter 2, trees, herbs, vegetables, fruits. 3, dwellings of men. 4, great objects of nature. 5, members of the body. 6, kinds of men. 7, dress phrases. 8, the arts. 9, metals. 10, numerals. 11, geography. 12, grammar. 13, mythology. 14, prolific roots. 15, difficulties solved. 16, crucial instances. 17, confusion. 18, English equivalents of Hebrew letters, which is very fascinating. It also helps to explain some things that we don't know anymore. They say it's of unknown origin, or there are certain pronunciations and sounds of letters that they don't know in the modern Hebrew. They don't know what it used to be. The ayin and all of its sounds that it makes, for example. But in this book, it actually shows the words and the sounds that came from it in English from those letters. And you can see, like the ayin at the end of a word would make the ng sound. But we'll get there. Chapter 19, omitted radicals. When there's letters, either the first, the second, or the third letters missing or right here. But 20, transpositions, when letters change positions from one another, as if you're dyslexic, for example. 21, the N internal. 22, the R internal. 23, S initial. 24, interchange of L and R. And these are all phenomena that have happened with words in the language from Hebrew into English. It's how it's changed over time in different ways. The violence done um, in a variety of ways. Not all people spoke this at one time, but it coalesced into the English language. Some, for example, like Germanic spread out and became all the different dialects. They pick up different words from one section and it was adopted by others at some times. That's kind of how some of the words in English came to us, and others would have changed in different ways at different times. The influences are shown throughout the book too. So the man who wrote this was very well versed in the languages and where the shiftings come from, like S into T, ZH into T, the D into T's, and that nature. But you have the interchange of L and R, the N initial, change of S into T. This is chapter 27. This is the digamma, which would be the letter F, the sixth letter in the Greek language, which lines up with the letter Wa, the character as well, the ancient character. And then that would be correlating with the letter F in English. 27, change of ZH into T. Or I'm sorry, that's 28. And then 29, Hebrew equivalents of English letters. And 30, miscellaneous concluding observations. No, we'll try to do at least one chapter at a time here. We'll see how much we can get. And then as we're going, I will do my best to go over the Hebrew letters as we get to them. But much of this is easy to follow along right in English, okay? The English language derived from the Hebrew. Chapter 1. Professor Max Mueller, in his lectures on language, having shown that several of our common English words are derived from the Sanskrit, it struck me to inquire what would be the result of tracing the obligations of the English language to the Hebrew. And having gone into this matter to some extent, I now believe that English is derived from the Hebrew. Dean Alford supposes that the Celtic, Hebrew, Arabic, Persian, and Spanish jointly contribute some 5% of the words to our native tongue. As the result of my inquiry, I should be inclined to say that there are not 5% of Saxon words which cannot be traced to the Hebrew. So while they said that 95% here, he's saying that there couldn't be 5% that can't be traced to it. He was claiming that even more. Um, and then when you learn about it, Arabic is a sister language. It's not really related, but we have through mixture adopted some of those words. The same with Persian. adopting a few of those words based on the migrations when we went into captivity. And again, Spanish is the influence. What we have, especially in America, adopted some of the words from there. But Spanish itself is a Romance Germanic language that was Hebrew. So it came from the Italian, which the Latin was originally a mixture of Hebrew and tongue from the sons of Japheth that were there, right? But we'll continue. I wish, however, not to theorize, but to present the reader with examples from which he can deduce his own conclusions. In this first part, I do not write for the learned, being assured that the question can be easily comprehended and will prove interesting to every English reader. Hence I give not the Hebrew letters, but the correspondent Roman ones. And he means the characters in the alphabet that we're familiar with in English. Section 1. I propose in this chapter to give specimens of the derivation of our names of animals from the sacred scripture. Now, I do want you to keep in mind this is going to be it's going to show you how far the languages have changed over time. And I don't want you to be discouraged to think that some things that mean something way off from what the word was originally means that it isn't true. Words for animals can be applied in different ways. The elephant is the aleph with an extension on it, and there's other words that are like that as well because it was meant to describe a type of animal. And that carried over generally. You'll also see this later on with the body parts where it got pretty mixed up. And then if you ever read the history of the English language from Webster's dictionary, I believe it's the 1886 edition, you'll see how much the preservation of our language was really due to the power of the Almighty to begin with. But we'll go ahead and continue here. It says, what is the Hebrew name for the hair? Arnbit. And there's an asterisk here. We go down here to look at it real quick. It says, I give the letters simply, not according to the Masoretic pointing, adding in smaller type the vowels supplied. And this is Arin bit right here, Aleph, Resh, Nun, Beit, Tau, which if you move that around, it becomes rabbit and you drop the end. Excuse me. But another book on the topic from the gentleman that wrote about the Celtic languages' affinity to the Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, also wrote a few essays about how the Masoretic text hides the truth, and you can actually supply the vowels for Hebrew without using the Masoretic text at all, and just using the Celtic languages and how they use vowels. But right here, when you just take the letters, and we'll see many examples, um, the the letter parallels just from Hebrew to English make it almost easy to see all of them. So here we go. But it says, now may not these letters at once hint to us whence our name of an allied animal is derived? Reverse an order of the A and the R, and you have ranbit, whence our word rabbit evidently comes, when you drop the N and double the bet. What is the Hebrew for the terrible serpent, deceiver of our race? Nachash. Change the last letter to the foremost, putting the S here, place, and you have our snake. It would be snachaik, right? Snachach, snahak. That would harden to that, like ruach, right? And then as it became in English, they would even make that the K sound. Hence, too, by a prefixed, we get the Latin angius and the Greek ekis, the letter N being dropped, as it is very often in Hebrew, which we'll see more examples of as well. And again, these are more evidences of the Latin and the Greek being influenced by Hebrew. When the sons of Japheth that had remained in the area after the desolations, and this is history that isn't so well known, but these city-states were first founded by Ham, Nimrod, people that were trying to build empires. They put their children over them, and there was paganism that were involved. Catastrophe happened. There was a flood in that area, the Penel in Greece, that destroyed it. And then when the Hebrews left Egypt, they refounded city-states in these areas, um, and mingled with the indigenous survivors. The ones that were of the sons of Yahweh that were in the area that we call Greece that mixed with them, they started speaking what we call the Greek language today. And then as they traveled and migrated to Italy, they mixed with them and they spoke Italian or Latin, not Italian, I'm sorry. Italian came much later. But these are what another book that was written way before this tries to show as well. So he's going to give you examples of this with the Greek and the Latin here, and especially later on when they get into the suffixes and prefixes for words, you'll see that the Latin prefixes and suffixes and the Greek ones are straight Hebrew, just conjoined together. It's really awesome. But it says, if the scripture be true, we might expect this word to be retained, and so it is. The Greek word for the viper is aspis, whence our word asp. It comes from the Hebrew zepah, transposed, which also signifies a viper. Whence comes the word boa, familiar to us as the name of the destroying boa constrictor. From the Hebrew apuo or apo, and it gives you down, which means a viper. And this is number 4. All of these are in the footnotes here. So you have nachash, where you'd have this read the other way with the noon here, it'd be snake, right? This is asp. This would be the afin that became the viper for them, okay? And that's afar, or afa, afa'a, or they say, I'm sorry, apoa, right? When they have the P or the pay, it can be a hard P or it can be an F, and it can change from a P to a B based on the Greek influence. They'll tell you that in a little bit. But it says the letters B, P, and F are perpetually interchanged in their passage from one language to another. From the same Hebrew word comes our English eft, which they have translated as the spider in the KJV, right? But it means a small creature of the lizard kind. And probably the Latin vipera comes from the same root. Um, I think we also will learn about where Vespasian's name comes from. It's not this one, though. The F or V being prefixed to the commencing vowel. The adder proceeds from atar to encircle and is derived from coiling itself into a series of circles. And the atar, where you'd have the T become a D, and the D doubles. The lion in Hebrew is labia, labia. The B is dropped in English, Latin, and Greek, which means la aya or leoa, right? And we have Leo in Latin, perhaps we might say that the B is transferred to the end and becomes N, whence comes our English word kitten. And you can see that's right here, kitten, right? This is labia or lion, Leo, when you drop the B, or if you move it over and have it mistaken for an N. A lot of the times, I can't speak to it for every word or how it might be for every one of these, but a lot of the ways where you can see the letters change, it's because it's a commonly mistaken from one to another, where you'd have a noon to a gimel, for example, or a hey and a chayth. It's not all of the words that do that, but there are some odd phenomenon that you'll see as we get into the book. So kitten comes from the Hebrew kutan, right? They always put the QU there in the English, but kiton, which signifies a little one, which is also where we get the word cute, right? That which the Hebrews applied generally, we have singularly enough appropriated to the young of the cat alone. Whence is derived our word camel? From the Hebrew gemel, which signifies the same animal. Here the G of the Hebrew becomes changed into the C or K of the English, Latin, and Greek. And it's really the Latin that started changing the sound from the G to the S when they were forming their language. Theirs went from the Gimel to the C from the character for it. What is the or derivation, I'm sorry, derivation of the word elephant? It comes from the Hebrew aleph, which means an ox. But how is the elephant like an ox? I answer the termination ant carries with it, most probably, the word which denoted the difference between it and the common ox. We naturally, on seeing a new creature, associate it with one familiar to us. Some of the South Sea Islanders, as Williams has informed us, had never beheld a European or the animals with which we are familiar. Hence, as he observes, on seeing the goats, they called to their companions to come and look at the wonderful birds with great teeth upon their heads. So with us, the cock of the woods and the woodcock are very different birds from the common barn door cock. The same Hebrew word was the origin of the Greek elaphos, a stag, and it is very remarkable that we find the same combination of ant and elaph in antelope. I am not clear what is the meaning of ant. The Hebrew shore and the Chaldean tor signify an ox. And we've talked about that before when he went to Beth Shore or the mountain of the ox, right? When Abraham was sojourning. They also have Tor for Taurus in the constellation for the ox. But it says the Hebrew shore and the Chaldee or the Kasdim Tor signify an ox, whence we obtain our English steer. The name of the Yerboa arises from the Hebrew Zehiboa, which signifies the hyena. The Kasdim add the R. Our word badger, and I'll be honest, I don't know what that is. So it's a desert-dwelling rodent with very long hind legs that enable it to walk upright and perform long jumps. Okay. The arbu is the modern Latin there. Excuse me. It says our word badger is derived from the Hebrew achbar, which means a mouse. By transposition, we have bakar, whence badger easily springs. Whence have we the word giraffe? And here's the word for giraffe right here. Ayin resh pei. This would be the word for akbar. And then this is etzboa, right? Zeboa right here. Shore, Eluf, Aleph, and Gemol, right? Sorry about that. And this is giddy, or where we get the word for kitty or kids, commonly used for children today for men, but it's really the name for a goat, which you'll see right here. Anyways, whence is the word giraffe? From the Hebrew garaf, garaf, which signifies the neck. And everyone who has seen that creature knows that its great peculiarity is the enormous elongation of its neck, whence are derived our words goat and kid, from two different pronunciations of the Hebrew giddy, which signifies that animal in the sacred tongue. Our expression, the giddy heights, perhaps springs from the remembrance of the lofty pinnacles of rock to which these creatures climb. The heights to which the mountain goats climb produce in us the sensation of giddiness. And all of these are related words to that word for goat in Hebrew. Whence is derived the word zebra? From the Hebrew zabi, which signifies a roebuck. The R in the middle, in the midst, and the A at the end come from the kasdim, which frequently adds these letters. Indeed, the R occurs so often in English where it is not found in the Hebrew as to make it most probable that the Hebrew came to us through the kasdim, which is exactly what you find if you study the Hebrew language and you want to learn how to pronounce it according to biblical Hebrew by reading the Masoretic points. Listening to the 503 Hebrew grammar from Bill Barrick is very worthwhile. If you even want just to learn the language, it's very worthwhile. He'll tell you that the influence that scholars know the Hebrew language first went through not an Aramaic, but a Kasdim influence, a Chaldean influence. Then it went into a more pure Hebrew, and then it was influenced by Babylonian again and others as it was taken out and spread amongst people. But that fact is seen right here as well. And then you also have another witness in Yobelim, where it records Abraham coming out of Ur of the Kasdim, not speaking the Hebrew tongue, but having it being given to him, and then him learning as he goes, exactly as you would see, or the phenomenon is proved right here. But it would have, this would have been backsliding, and then children, or some of the Hebrews that would have left before the influence would have been completely taken out. It says, indeed, the R occurs so often in English where it is not found in Hebrew. I already read that part, I'm sorry. The dough clearly is traceable to the toa, or antelope, where the T becomes a D. And you can see right here real quick, Zabi, toa, and then we have koat, and this would be yin shif, yin, yanash, or yan suf, and then dub, dove. We'll get to those. Oh yeah, see, dove. I'm guessing on what it might be based on the Hebrew letters there. But here we go. This is section 2. It says, but let us now turn to some examples of birds. We have two examples of birds spelt differently, but of the same radical base. Coot and kite. These are offshoots, I doubt not, of the Hebrew quat. And we just looked at that right here. Quat. I retain the English letter Q to represent the Hebrew kof or kof, though I suppose it was generally pronounced K. And the kof, I do the same thing because it correlates with our Q. It's where our Q comes from. The pronunciation of the letter does not always denote what the character is. So, like the aleph and the ayin, as you're going to see, it makes a variety of vowel sounds. But today, they would be making unique sounds that are only to one, like the A does not make E, I, or O sounds. But back here, it did. It's just the way it worked. And that has more to do with the way the Hebrew language works itself, which you'll see examples of, and we've talked about it before, the verb tenses, which there are 5 different verb tenses in the Hebrew. Whatever verb tense you're using would change the vowels of the words that you are speaking throughout the entire sentence on occasion, as far as I'm aware. This is, though I suppose it was generally pronounced K. Probably also our cat is derived therefrom. Though whence the confusion arose, it would be difficult to determine without the history of Gen 11. The meaning of the Hebrew word is the pelican or the cormorant. The Hebrew speaks of a bird called insop. Okay, the insop. And that would be the word. This is the bird I believe that was used by Moshe in Egypt that would be, they ate the snakes. They protected them from the serpents or the crocodiles or something like that while he was traveling to fight the wars for Egypt before the Exodus, before his banishment and whatnot. You can read about the account in Josephus. It says, this is supposed to be a waterfowl of some kind. The Septuagint renders the word ibis, our translators, the great owl. But whatever its original signification, it is the parent word, or sorry, it is the parent of our word snipe, a bird fond of marshy places. This is an instance of the Saxon love of brevity, where it makes it into one syllable, right? The 2 syllables in the Hebrew are contracted into one in English. This principle appears often. Whence is derived our English dove from the Hebrew dob. And it really, the bet as a letter in Hebrew could be the B sound or the V. So this could just as easily be dove with no qualms whatsoever, which signifies to murmur, like they're hooting and murmuring they do, the cooing. The B was frequently pronounced V, and this was the only legitimate V sound in the Hebrew in the original language. The wa does become a V sound both in the modern Hebrew and in the derivatives in the Anglo-Saxon, some of it pronounced with a V, what would have been also becoming a W in other ones, which was the Vav or the Wa. But that was not the original or the legitimate one. It is something that has happened in the language, though. Sometimes also it was changed into P and PH, as I have noted above, which we'll see more examples of that. And another one was Parthians and Barth, right? It's the covenant people, or the which was Parthian by the Greeks. Okay, so right here it says, the sparrow is found in most parts of the old world. What is its Hebrew name? Zeppor. The Saxon word has manifestly sprung from this, the Z and P combined. The vowel is inserted after them, and the long O, which in Hebrew precedes the R, is set last. Sparrow. The Latin name is another variation of the same letters, passer, hence to the Greek peristera, a dove. Whence comes the name pelican? From the Hebrew peleg, which signifies a stream or channel. It indicates then a water bird, and it is well known the pelican obtains its food from the water. Whence is our word raven derived? From the Hebrew Arab. I denote the letter ayin by an A or E or O with a comma, thus. So whenever he has the comma there, this is the ayin, and again, it can make a variety of sounds. Not to mention it also can be a G, as we've already seen. Transpose the first, it can also be a Y sound at the end, which might not be so much because of the original way it was sounding, but the way the character looks, which is another phenomenon that we've had happen before, even in the English at a later time, with thee and thou becoming you and your. Transpose the first two letters and add an N, which addition at the close is common in Hebrew, and you have raven, because the B can be a V. Thence two are robin, right? Which it's a mixture, or um, it means darkness too. Or there's a few meanings for the ayin, or for Arab. I'm sorry. Arab is mixture. It's also like evening. There we go. The crow, or rook, takes his name from his perpetual caw, caw. His appellation is derived from the Hebrew kara, with a broad A, which means to call. The name rook comes from the same letters transposed, where this one goes here, right? Hence also comes our words cry and crew, a number of men whose names are called over and who must answer to the call. Call also when you have the R transposed to L. A bird's craw comes from the Hebrew garah, which signifies the cud. We often hear at nightfall, especially in the spring, a harsh, reedy call of a single note, proceeding from the midst of the corn. This cry is uttered by the corn crake, right? Its name is derived from the Hebrew harik, which signifies the unpleasant sound produced by grinding or gnashing the teeth. Now, as the genius of our language will not admit the H or admit of H immediately preceding R, the H is turned into its sister letter C. So if we look right here, this letter 6 would be harik, harik. And because in the English they don't want to have the H there, it's creek. They just have the C there, and the faith becoming a C, a K, or an H is a phenomenon that has happened on occasion. It says now, I'm sorry, we read that part. So it turned the H into its sister letter C, and it becomes the parent word's descriptive of unpleasant sounds as creak, croak. This is also the origin of the Greek word for crow, korax, charik, right? You just transpose that korax. and hence kerux, a herald. The hawk is formerly or was formerly called hafok by the Saxons. It is still in Danish havik, and German habich or habich. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that. Habicht. It derives its name from the Hebrew hafok, which means the destroyer. And you can see right here. Hafok. They have the pay as the F there. We still retain the word havoc as meaning destruction. Whence do we get our da? From da, which probably means a kite. Our ko from sahof, a seagull. And these are words that we don't really use in English anymore. But you can see it's a bird. What shall we say is the origin of our word egret? It comes from the word egort, a crane. The word crane is derived from the Hebrew garan, a throat. It is related of one of the epicures among the ancients. Epicuries among the ancients that believing the throat to be the organ of taste, he desired his throat were as long as the crane's. From this word is derived the Greek garanos and the Latin gros or grus, each of which signifies the crane. Excuse me. And these ones are even closer to Garan than crane seems to be, but RCG change happened there. And again, we made into one syllable what was two. Our word goal comes from goal, to move in a circuit, which is quite characteristic of the seagull. The name of condor comes from the Hebrew kodor, which means to be dark. The N being inserted by way of strengthening the root. From the same base is derived the brook Kedron, the Kedron brook mentioned in Scripture. And you see they have the K there for the Kof. The name toucan is probably obtained from the Hebrew toucan, to be straight, from the remarkably long bill of the bird. Hebrew is traceable in the Latin and Greek names also. The Latin name of the nightingale is Lucinia, which is derived from the Hebrew lushin, the tongue, lushen, right? Its melodious voice could but give it its distinguishing title, the bird with the tongue of melody. So the ass is in Latin asinus, asinus, which is derived from the Hebrew azin, an ear. Two syllables becoming one, right? And dropping the N there. But that's where we get the name for a donkey in English. Its long ears gave it the name of the beast with the prominent ears. The Greeks called the swallow Chilidion or Chilidon, which I'm sorry if I don't pronounce that right, which comes from the Hebrew chalid, which signifies transient. It took its name as being the bird of passage. Our word swallow comes from the Hebrew salo, or you can say shalo, which we translate, and that's right here, shalo, cheldon, or chelond. What was that one? Chelidon, right here. Azin, lashon, right here. Okay, so you can see these are all where the Greek comes from, or where the words here come from in the Hebrew. I can do that for every word, but I don't want to go back and forth for you, especially for people who can't read the language. It doesn't really help. But when you can see the English characters and where it comes from, you'll start to see over and over that our language was Hebrew. It got messed up like muddy water down the river, but this is what I've been trying to say for a long time here. They say shalom or salo translates as quail in the history of Yisrael in the wilderness, but which Forrester has shown to mean a red-legged goose. The Greek aktos signifies an eagle. It takes its origin from the Hebrew ait, and that would be the ayin with the tet, or a tau, which signifies a bird or a beast of prey. The Latin aquila, which also signifies an eagle, comes from the Hebrew akol, a devourer. Our osprey derives from peros, a kind of eagle. All right, in section 3 from chapter 1 here says, shall we look to some specimens among the fishes? Whence do we obtain the word fish? From the Hebrew nephesh, which generally signify a living thing. And if you've ever looked at Eric Bissell's Erictology, he'll describe the letter noon here as like that, the fish's tail in water, or like a lightning bolt. It's the living thing or the moving thing. So nefesh, you drop the N, you get fesh, which is fish, but it's a living creature or a living being. It says, but fishes are the first to which it is applied in Genesis 1:21. So that could be why that was called that generally by them. And just right here, you can see for number, or where are we at? Nefesh right here, number 3. You would drop the noon and it's just fish. But we, after dropping the first letter N, which is a very unstable one in that language, have appropriated it to one class of animals in the sea. Thence too spring the Latin piscis, from the F becoming a P, and the French poissum, poissum, like Poseidon, right? Hence also probably our pus. What is the Hebrew for scorpion? Akrab. But we have no scorpions. How then should that name be naturalized among us? It is true that we have no scorpions, and let us be thankful for it. But when our ancestors traveled from the east to our shores, they saw a creature in the sea possessed of great claws, moving about like a scorpion, and they cried, Akrab, Akrab. The first A was mistaken for the English indefinite article, a crab, and our love of monosyllables soon cut it short into crab. This is also the parent of the Greek and Latin scorpio. Okay. The S is added by the Kasdim. The ANQ, and remember, I didn't know about how it happened, but I'm learning more of the history. In Sinanchus, the Phoenician history that shows what happened pre-flood and post-flood as a contemporary with the Bible, it exposes these things. But Cush, Nimrod, Ham, the first magicians, the ones that were dominating men and bringing them into subjection, because when you will not serve our Creator under His kingdom, you have to serve the adversary under His. And just as everyone was being subjected to Rome now as the fourth beast kingdom under Satan, so it was then that they were under Nimrod or whoever was the dominant priest of the adversary at that time, the High Witch or whatever you want to call them, right? And they founded these city-states and they mixed their people, but those were the influences of the mystery religions that were there that the Hebrews could have mixed with as they went. Whether that is how that happened, or they mixed from Babylon and then, or the Chasdim and then took it out, I can't speak in, for sure. But the evidence of the facts that it happened, you can see in the language. That's what I'm trying to point out to you. Says the S is added by the Chasdim, the A and Q change places and become SCO. The B becomes a P, and so we have Scorpio. Hence also the Latin crabro, a hornet, or crabro. The Latin word for crab, cancer, the second C being hard, springs from the Hebrew kakar, a circle with the strengthening N. The fish's body is circular. The whelk is a shellfish which sticks to the rocks. It comes from the Hebrew elk, to adhere. And you can see it right here, elk. You just put the W in front of it, which is I've heard, and I don't know this, anyone that might be more familiar can please feel free to do so and elucidate us. But I've learned somewhat that the wa as a prefix was used in Hebrew, and that is what like the Anglo-Saxons would use to come up with Woden instead of Adon, and with instead of at or ata for the Aleph Tau. But there's other examples of that. Whether or not this is what happened here, I can't say for sure. It says the elk comes from this root. Probably to our leech is derived from the same root by transposition, right? You put that first as la eat, where that Q would be softened to a CH. The Hebrew hadidok signifies a thorn. The name probably originally signified some fish with a thorny back, but the English haddock clearly derives its or thence its name. Our perch takes its name, I think, from the Hebrew perah, which signifies to break out, to shoot out, and it refers probably to its power of erecting the prickles on its back. Section 4. Shall we now take a glance at insects? The spider in Hebrew is ikvis. And again, this is the ayin right there. We'll take a look at this word. It's ikvis. They have ayin, kaf, bet, yod, sheen. Most times, and not always, but they'll have the sheen make an S instead of an SH, which was a phenomenon that happened with Ephraim in particular. Okay. So ikvis with the Kasdim R added, it becomes the French that's Ervisi, right? Which we have turned into crayfish. Here is a curious change of meaning. And they have a footnote here. It says Max Mueller noticed the two cognate words in French and English, but not its Hebrew origin. The wasp takes its name from its sting. The Hebrew root is azab, the meaning of which is pain. The peculiar, so azab wasp, right? The peculiar letter or Hebrew letter with which it begins is often expressed in English by an initial W. what I just mentioned, as we have seen above in the case of whelk. Hence, too, the Latin vespa, a wasp. Vespasian is the bringer of pain, or the causer of pain, which is literally what his name lived up to. I thought that was interesting. The flea in Hebrew is faras, but I'm sorry, philologists, the lovers of languages, okay, are agreed that the L and R are constantly interchanged. A lisping pronunciation of R makes L. The S, and this is also something that happens quite often with the Japanese language. The fact that some 190,000 Hebrews migrated into Japan is witness to both of themselves. I found a documentary I'd shared before on Facebook for a while ago that I'll share again, but it's on YouTube. And then there's also a website that had a gentleman that was doing a talk in the 1920s about the stuff that he had learned while spending decades in Japan and how he believed that a lot of their customs came right from the Israelites in dispersion. It was not all of them. I can't speak for what group it belonged to. Some, I believe, of the scholars that studied it believe they could be a branch of Manasseh, but I don't know. What I do know is that they do have a phenomenon of switching their R's and L's. The S was dropped as being in our language a sign of the plural, thence we have flee. Flee, right? When that becomes an L. There is a singular worm which surrounds itself with stones and sticks, well known to anglers and called the caddish worm. This name is derived from the Hebrew kadosh, which signifies, it says holy here, but it signifies being separate or separated. Yerushalayim in our day is called El Quds, the separate or the set apart. From this, I should gather that the creature was once regarded as set apart. Now, it would be difficult to guess whence its title was derived. Now, it surrounds itself with sticks or with stones and sticks, meaning it sets itself apart. That's probably where the word came from by the nature of what it did. The English word beetle may be derived from the Hebrew flat by transposition. I know that might seem weird, but watch it for a moment. Look at this right here. Palat or flat, right? The P becoming a B and putting the T in the middle and doubling it. Beetle. But by transposition. It is the original of our words flat, plate, fleet, float, flit, pedal, and others, which a pedal is a flat piece, right? The word emet takes its origin from the Hebrew ami. We'll look at that real quick. Ama, uh, amia, they say, to associate together a people, like Emma they call that Emma in Hebrew, or Emmanuel is L with us. But Emet takes its origin from the Hebrew Ema, to associate together a people owing to the creature's social propensities. The English moth is derived from the Hebrew ma'ot or ma'ot, little, small, whence also are mote and might. The word worm springs, I believe, from the Hebrew orum, to be naked, to be slippery, where we put you can see that's the ayin, and they put the W in front of it. Here again, the peculiar letter with which the Hebrew origin or word begins is expressed in English by W. Hence, to the Latin vermis, which turns that W into a V, and the Greek helmins. The destructive locust takes its name from the Hebrew lokish, to pluck, to consume. The gnat takes its name from nad, to fly, the D becoming a T there. All right. And that brings us to the end of chapter 1. I think I'm going to stick to individual chapters on these to keep them simple. I might do more than one at a time as we go into this, but um, we'll break them up into smaller sections. So, Father willing, you can see how many words straight from the Hebrew are derived or are straight from English or derived from the Hebrew. These are common words that we use from animals, and it goes into a whole bunch of just the normal words we use for throughout the English language. Um, it's an amazing thing to learn, and I hope that it will help us to really get in our minds that we are the literal seed of Abraham. Not that it means we're special, like superiority of race or anything like that, but the fact that the promises, the covenants, and everything is directly applicable. The laws where it says, this is for you and your children forever, like all the feast days in the Torah, is applicable. And our not keeping it is the reason why we are having the problems in our country that we do, and in every country that we dwell in, because it's not the skin color, but it's the people that he's wanting. And we'll see as time goes on that we come in all shapes and sizes. But thank you for your time here, and you have a wonderful day, week, and life. Yahuah will be with you.